Have a roll call, please.
Jared Rookie,
Here.
Brian Crawford,
Here.
Leonard Knapp,
Here.
Eula Simeon,
Here.
Robert Meir,
Here.
Lenore Feeney, here, and Jason Henn.
Here.
Call for a moment of silence, please. Pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We reached item 5 on the agenda, an opportunity to address the commission by employees and others on items on the agenda. We have several requests. Some of those requests relate to proposed rule changes, and unless there's an opposition from the people who are submitting those requests, I suggest we save those until we get to that item on the agenda. Is there any objection to that? We do also have a request on the agenda to address the proposed layoff avoidance. It's Mr. Brett Conrad.
Yes, sir. On behalf of Mr. Coates, I would invite the opportunity, perhaps after we discuss the proposed layoff avoidance, maybe go after or before.
Why don't you go ahead and make your comments now, and then we'll have them, we'll take them into consideration.
Okay. The only reason why is because the presentation hasn't happened yet, so we don't quite know what that presentation and that offering is going to be. So that's why we would prefer to go after if that's the commission's purview.
Is there any objection from the commissioners? That's fine.
Thank you.
We just got 2 more requests. Got more coming? All right. All right, we also got a request on behalf of Mr. Curley. Sorry, I can't read the name. All right. We'll save that until we get to that item on the agenda as well, relative to the appeal.
It's relative to the settlement appeal. I'm not even sure it's necessary since it's on the agenda, but just out of an abundance of caution.
That's fine. I was just having a hard time reading the
I
handbook.
don't care what anything.
If you write as bad as I do, you ought to be able to read anything, but unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case. And there's also a request by Jason Storns to again address the issue of the layoff avoidance, and we'll save that as well until we get to that item.
And he's the department representative, sir.
Okay, at this point, we'll move to item 6 on the agenda. 6.1 is consideration of the February 13, 2020 minutes.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second to approve the minutes of February 13, 2020. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Item number 2 is the 6.2 is request from the Department of Public Safety and Corrections, Office of State Police for retroactive approval of the layoff avoidance measure taken in fiscal year 2016-17 to withhold performance adjustments. And there's a representative here to speak.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I was just going to give a little background information before representatives came up to speak on this item. We discovered that the agency did not submit a layoff ordinance request for fiscal year 16-17 based on the rules that were in effect October 1st of 2016, where a performance increase would have been granted that particular year. The fiscal year 16-17 was a year when the extraordinary budget deficits were projected by the governor's office and the legislature. There were multiple special sessions, legislative sessions in 2016 in anticipation of the reduced budget. And as a result, the Department of Civil Service was asked by the governor's office to suspend performance increases for nearly 30,000 classified state civil service employees. The State Civil Service Commission took that consideration up, and they passed an extraordinary rule which eliminated the ability for an appointing authority to pay a performance increase for fiscal year 16-17. The governor, who is over the controls the unclassified service, issued an executive order which suspended the performance adjustments or merit increases for approximately 20,000 unclassified employees. And those both went into effect before the beginning of fiscal year 16-17. A request was not made of this commission to do any extraordinary rule change to eliminate the eligibility of a performance adjustment for fiscal year 16-17. Additionally, agencies that were under the Department of Civil Service were not required to go before them to ask for a layoff avoidance measure for fiscal year 16-17 because essentially the rule was eliminated that particular year. So as a result, I believe the Department of Public Safety did not request they weren't required to submit a request for the over 2,000 employees that they have in the classified service, and therefore I believe they did not come before us to request it for the state police service. I think that's where it leads us today.
Good morning, Lieutenant Colonel Jason Starnes. Appreciate the opportunity to come and address some of the concerns that have been discussed in front of the commission, and I certainly agree with the summary that Director Hanneman just provided to you in regards to some of the history of what occurred during that fiscal year. And he's absolutely correct. That particular fiscal year was especially fiscally troubling. As a matter of fact, within state police, there were 2 major budget cuts that were given to the agency during that year. So as y'all's previous discussions regarding the lack of a formal request to withhold performance adjustments, the remedy that we've kind of taken under advisement would be to, at least now, make that formal request to you retroactively back to that fiscal year so that the commission can review that and then take action and to, I guess, remedy that technical deficiency. I'd be happy to answer any questions or provide more explanation if we need it.
Colonel, thanks for coming. My only concern is that this will be the final year based on 3-year limitation to restore that 3% at the end of this fiscal year. Am I correct on that, Director? If we approve the layoff avoidance, that this is the last year that they can actually.
As the rules are written, the window for restoration of a missed performance increase is a 36-month window.
Okay. So
you're correct.
All right. So based on the letter, it just basically states that if fiscal conditions improve, so as it stands now, the department does not expect to be able to restore that 3%, or is there something that the department is planning on in regards to restoring this 3% at the end of this fiscal year?
Well, I can tell you that we currently don't have a specific plan or a date by which we would be able to do that. As we continue to move throughout the budget cycle, I think it's important to, I guess, to understand how the budgeting process and the management of the department's budget works is that, we start off with, the legislature approves what the department's budget is. They provide budget authority, which is your essentially an expenditure limit, what you're approved to spend up to. But all of that has to be backed up by the department receiving revenues to support those expenditures. So those two things have to be balanced as we manage the budget. We currently are, and there are a few of our revenue sources that are under collecting, so we're not having as much money coming into the agency. So as we continue to manage that, and so I can't come to you today and guarantee you that that will happen, but what I can tell you is that there is a sincere effort to want to do that if we have the ability. But at the end of the day, we have to have the funds available in which to apply.
Director Hanneman, as I understand, the 36-month limitation is based on one of our rules.
Yes, sir.
And obviously, we can't make a rule change today, but with appropriate notice, this commission could, in fact, amend that limitation.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I just want to make sure I was clear on that. Any other questions from any of the commissioners? Commissioner Knapp?
I'm a little confused. The 3%, it was a 3% raise back in 16-17. It was
Performance adjustment.
performance adjustment raise there that was not given. And we're deciding about whether or not we want to do that. What's the physical effect if we don't do that?
Essentially, well, the agency is requesting the authority to withhold based on that they've already withheld it. And the proper posture would have been for them to come in prior to the October 1st distribution date and ask for withholding of that performance adjustment that year. And it would be a prospective adjustment if the adjustment was granted. So it would be based on their revenues as of this fiscal year, if they wish to pay it prospectively.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I'm sorry.
It's okay. If I remember last month's discussion, this doesn't affect everybody, because there are a certain number of people who were promoted since that time have picked up that 3%. I think that was some of the discussion, was some of those people who have been promoted did in fact get that 3% as they got promoted, and then some of the people who haven't have kind of been left out. So it's, how many people are we talking about?
The latest number that I had, and it may have changed because it's a moving target daily, but there's roughly 460 employees that are missing that one step. When you look at that pay grid, vertically going down are your 3% step. So there's approximately 460 employees that are missing that one step. Another group of people I think to keep in mind that would no longer be eligible to receive that, and that is because the way the pay grid operates, going down, your max pay would equate to level 22, which service tenure-wise would be 22 years of service. So if you have been with the agency long enough, let's say 24 years, you have already met, even though you missed that one step, your time in service tenure has got you to where your max pay is. So there's no mechanism, and those persons would not be eligible to receive that because they're already at their max pay.
Have there been any fiscal calculations done as to where if we did implement this and require the authority to do that, and how much it would cost?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question, because to apply it prospectively, so today forward, June 1st forward, whatever day that would be selected, we would basically take those employees that have been impacted, what 3% increase to their salary would be, and then multiply that times the number of pay periods remaining in our current fiscal year. So as of June 30th, our budget ends and we start over with a new one. The cost to do it in the current year would be based on the day it's implemented times the number of pay periods we have to pay the increase in the salaries. Another consideration from the administration's perspective is that when you apply that 3% increase across the board, in the current year, you're only paying it for those pay periods. You have to annualize that cost into the entire next fiscal year. And to ensure, are we going to have money to continue paying it for all 12 months in addition to the next 3% step that is planned in the budget as of now? Right, so you have to annualize that cost, and you could potentially set yourself up for a budget shortfall or having insufficient funds for the annualized cost in the out years. But to answer your question, the annualized cost, I think we estimated to be about 1.6 million. The cost to do it in the current year, of course, would depend on whenever it was.
Sure. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
I think we had a request to speak on this issue. Yes, sir. When you get up to the podium, go ahead and identify yourself.
Brett Conrad, Commissioners, on behalf of Mr. Coates, and I have Mr. Coates sitting next to me as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have after we give a brief statement, and I'll be brief. If the Commission recalls, the last time we were here, we were discussing this issue in terms of how it affected Mr. Coates, and that effectively Mr. Coates has been one step behind in his pay grid since 16 and 17. Now, understand that the determination from the director is that he has missed a merit increase due to this budget shortfall in 16 and 17, that the rules were never followed to not pay him. This layoff avoidance did not occur in 16 and 17. When you look at 17.10, the rules do not allow you to retroactively go back and make this change of mistake. And the reasoning is because when you look at the rules, it talks about all kinds of notice requirements, not only to the employees but to the commission, that aren't going to be able to be fulfilled. For instance, it requires an approval for the director within 14 calendar days after the effective date of the layoff avoidance. That's not going to be able to occur because we are now in 2020. Furthermore, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to go afterwards, after the presentation was made by state police, but I don't see any indication where there's any written request naming the reasons for the layoff avoidance, the names and the names of the people who are going to be affected, the jobs, the proposed effective date, and the geographic area. These are some of the problems that Mr. Coates and I see with the retroactive effect, or trying to retroactively go back and do a layoff avoidance procedure. Now, I understand the point of view is that, well, the state police is trying to come in and fix its mistake. But the problem is as Major Starnes told you, they have no idea whether or not they are going to even be able to prospectively apply this layoff avoidance to Mr. Coates. The damage has already been done. He was owed the merit increase in 16 and 17 because the layoff avoidance procedure did not occur, and now state police's attempt to now essentially cover their butts to go back and try to fix the problem. The damage has already been done. Mr. Coates was eligible to retire a long time ago, and he's still going to have to continue working to meet his 3 years for retirement. That's a reality, and that's a real-life effect to Mr. Coates that he did not plan on because of the damage that was done by state police not doing what they needed to do. Thank you. And I'll be open to any questions that the Commission may have.
Questions? Yes, Commissioner Crawford, please.
Have you calculated what it would cost, just in Mr. Coates' instance,
For what?
to go back and to make him whole in your definition?
Well, it would be 3%.
But I'm saying, prospectively, or you're talking about going back retroactively, at the time that he should have been awarded the 3%, is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
You're not talking about prospectively, you're talking about going back retroactively from the time he should, what you're saying, the time he should have been awarded the 3% compounded to his years of service from then. Do you have a number for that?
I don't have a number to offer the Commission.
Okay.
But the problem is that we're here to try to do this layoff avoidance mechanism, which would be in violation of 17.10. As the Commission decided, I believe, last meeting, it was clear that there's been some issues and some rule violations. And the Commission invited the state police to try to fix the issue. I believe that is what state police are trying to do, but the problem is that they're really not doing that, because we have no idea whether or not there's really going to be a prospective effect and give him the merit increase and on or forward. As Major Starnes stated to y'all, there's some budgetary issues, and one thing that he had mentioned was that whether or not there was, the merit increase was factored into the budget.
Okay, hold on a second. I understand that.
Okay.
Let me rephrase the question then. If I remember correctly, we're talking about you were planning to retire this year, or?
Yes, I was eligible to retire last summer.
Okay. And I think if I remember the conversation that we had last month, that would have been something that you would have done had you received this 3%, but you had to stay on and
Yes, I'm trying to
recoup
get my-
some of that cost before you retire.
Yes, I'm trying to
As a
get my
former civil
salary
servant,
squared away.
I can appreciate that. So, do you know what percentage or what kind of a difference it would have made in your retirement?
I don't know the exact numbers.
And I don't have to have an exact number, but I
Yes.
mean, would it have just been 3% more, or?
No, sir.
I know it would have been different. It would have been compounded.
It would have been.
It would have been 3%
we
for
were-
the past
Right.
3 years.
Right,
It was actually 6% behind
okay.
for 2016, 2017, 2018, and half of 2019.
So 6% of your
6%
salary for each
for
one of
those-
those years,
yes.
you get your top, you got 3 years, top 3 years vested, that
Yes,
way
sir.
you get that.
Yes.
And that's forever.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. And could potentially be for your spouse too, depending on what
That's correct,
retirement
yes, sir.
option you took, so it's a significant impact.
Yes.
Yes.
sir.
Okay, I just want to be clear. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Would the department like to respond briefly?
Thank you, and I'll be brief. I did want to point something out because I think it's relevant to the commission and consideration of future rule changes, perhaps. But when the reference made to Chapter 17 that provides the situations by which the department can request a layoff avoidance measure, specifically it says in 17.58.
Just one second, let me catch up with that. 17.58.
Yes, sir. Okay, layoff avoidance measures shall consist of early retirement incentives, withholding of merit increases, reduction of work hours, reduction of rates of pay, and furloughs. I think what's important to note here is that the references to merit increases, the language regarding merit increases ceased to exist in 2014, and performance adjustments were used. However, this rule is now inconsistent with the reference made to a missed performance adjustment. Layoff avoidance defines it as a merit increase and not a performance adjustment. I wanted to bring that to the attention of the commission.
You're talking about for future?
Well, no, well, it's relevant to the discussion, and to the points that have been made just now, is that the request for the retroactive is a performance adjustment, but the rules regarding the requirements or what you can request a layoff avoidance for refers to a merit increase, which terminology ceased to exist in 2014 and was coined as a performance adjustment. So there's inconsistencies within the State Police Commission rules in regards to the withholding of a performance adjustment versus a merit increase.
And if I may briefly make,
Just
briefly.
Just one second.
Okay.
Is there a desire to hear additional comments?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, but that's not the reason why the department did not ask for it, because of the language, as you pointed out, it's inconsistent with the current language based on the pay plan, correct?
No, I wouldn't say that was necessarily the basis for that. The basis of it was because there was insufficient funds for which the agency to provide it. So regardless of any technical formal actions taken, at the end of the day, the agency did not have sufficient funding in which to provide that, which is a requirement of the state's constitution regarding Chapter 6 rules.
Just briefly, the issue with the language and whether or not we need to use the term merit increase or performance adjustment. If the department's position is that we're using the wrong terminology, then or should we not be looking at 17.10 and then we can't do this in the first place?
I didn't read the department's position as that. I think
Okay.
you're pointing out something that needs to be clarified as we go through the rule changes.
Understood.
All right, thanks for your submissions.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Just one second.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Crawford.
I'm going to make a motion that both parties, for the state police and representative for Mr. Coates, submit written briefs to the commission so that the commission will have time to review the positions in more detail. This is a big issue, and it's a complex issue anytime you're dealing with finance. And so I want to make sure that, aside from what's been said from both sides, and we've been able to absorb that and write as much as I can, but I think I need to see some more in writing from both sides on the issue, as well as address some of the questions in more detail that have been brought up by some of my fellow commissioners here today. So my motion is that we ask both sides to present briefs by in the next 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today, for the commission to provide. It's not time for you to speak.
Okay.
For the commission to have those in the next 2 weeks from today to review, and then the matter be brought up at the next commission meeting. It's my motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, next item on the agenda is 6.3, in matter of Eric Curley, Department of Public Safety and Corrections, Office of State Police, docket number 18-239 and 18-243. And there's discussion of the proposed settlement agreement and presentation by the parties.
Good morning, Commission members. Michelle Gerard on behalf of the Department of Public Safety, Office of State Police.
Morning, Donovan Libertarian, on behalf of Trooper Taylor.
Who would like to proceed first?
I will. We submitted an agreement for your consideration and approval. Over several months, the parties have worked through the issues in the case and came to the resolution that we presented to you today. That is essentially to reduce the suspension time and return 120 hours of work credit to Trooper Curley and settle the appeal.
Is there anything else you'd like to say on that? Just the agreement
If you
speaks
have
for
any
itself?
questions, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, Mr. Libercari.
Yes, sir. I mean, I only submitted a card. If you had any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, at this point, hearing no more presentation, we'd entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Second.
I'll take a roll call vote, please.
Jared Rudy,
Yes.
Brian Crawford,
Yes.
Leonard Knapp,
Yes.
Robert Meir,
Yes.
and Eugene Simmons.
Yes. Okay, as usual,
I move. Second.
go ahead and take a roll call vote,
Jared Rudy,
Here.
Brian Crawford,
Here.
Leonard Knapp,
Yes. I'm sorry, yes.
Robert Meir,
Yes.
Eugene Simmons.
please. Yes. And despite the fact that we have some hears and some yeses, I think
It's all yes.
we have a unanimous to move back into session. Okay, we're back into public session on the matter of Eric Curley, Department of Public Safety and Corrections, Office of State Police, docket numbers 18239 and 18243-S. Do we have any motions?
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the settlement proposal as submitted.
I'd like to second it.
Any discussion? Do we need a roll call for this?
Just confirm one thing, their settlement agreement only has one docket number, and these are consolidated cases.
I thought the other one was dismissed.
Was it? Oh, I thought they were consolidated.
We had the motion for
Okay.
summary disposition on the
Okay.
other one. And we-
Okay, all right, then we're all okay.
Do we need a roll call vote on this, or is? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it, the settlement agreement has been approved.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is, item 6, subparagraph 4, public hearing to consider proposed changes to chapter 11 of the State Police Commission rules. Details were contained in the circular 203, and we had several people who have requested to speak on this item. Michelle Gerard, Mark Oxley, Mike Noel, that was it.
Mary Ann White.
I'm sorry.
Mary Ann White.
Okay. And who?
Mary Ann White.
Okay, I don't see a card, but I accept that. It's somewhere on this mess. All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner, I'm sorry.
Uh,
Director.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, last month, you reviewed and heard comment and considered multiple changes within Chapter 11, and then also you adopted many changes within Chapter 11, as well as Rule 12.4. Those changes were posted on the Commission's website, and those changes were made in the official rules. There were some items that were remaining and that you asked for additional comment from the parties. Due to the brief time frame or the abbreviated month of February and the Mardi Gras holiday, the deadline for that hit on Mardi Gras itself. But we did receive comments. They were compiled. For the most part, the agency is supportive of the rules as they were posted. There are some edits. I provided you with a chart so we can navigate those potential changes. And just as a reminder, the purpose of many of the Chapter 11 rule changes were simply status quo changes. There were some verbiage changes regarding reference to the Office of State Police. One potential new rule was a rule that is already being used by the State Civil Service, and then also is verbiage from the Governor's Executive Office on unclassified leave. So again, that is being used by roughly 60,000 other state workers. And so it was looked at to put it into a similar posture for the appointing authority for state police to use for the Office of State Police. Currently, the colonel is over approximately 2,500 leave earning positions. 40% of those are in the state police service, and the remaining 60% are in the fall under the classified civil service jurisdiction or fall under the leave jurisdiction of the governor's executive order on unclassified leave. And with that being said, I think just want to give you that brief overview.
If you don't mind, why don't you walk us through each one of these, and those who requested comment, opportunity to comment, why don't you come forward. And as we get to each one, if you want to make a comment on it, let's stick the comment to the particular proposed change that they're dealing with.
I'll provide copies of the chart.
Yes, yes.
One of the rules that was carried over from last month's meeting was 11.9, enforced annual leave. And the department is provided a edit to both the LSTA and the department provided an edit, potential edit to 11.9C.
There was no comments received.
Correct.
Okay.
Any discussion from any commissioners? Yep, Ms. White. I'm
Okay,
sorry I
yeah.
missed your card earlier.
Okay, that's okay.
Wasn't trying to leave you out.
I didn't know if it was time for us to make a comment now, or do y'all want to do?
Did you have a comment relative to 11.9B?
I did. Oh, not B, C.
Okay. We're on B right now.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, so,
No comment to B.
all right. Any questions on B by any of the commissioners? Okay, we have a motion to approve the proposed change.
So moved. Second.
We can do this by voice vote. We don't have to have roll call. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. And we'll move on to 9C.
The main difference there, I think, is the addition was suggested by the association as to whether annual or compensatory, and then the department is recommending just put the annual in front of it. Those are one of the first change there.
In reference to that, Chairman, what's the,
Commissioner Miracle.
I have a question for the department. What is the first thing that, if someone's put on forced leave, what is the first thing that the department uses of the employee? Is it annual leave or is it compensatory time?
I think the practice has been compensatory time. But the reason we suggested the edit to clarify annual leave is because this rule is relating to annual leave. So this rule change that the commission is proposing is a change to annual leave, forced annual leave. So just to clarify that, I mean, the rule as proposed doesn't address compensatory leave. And there was no proposed rule change in the compensatory leave provision to restore the leave. It's merely in the annual leave, so we thought just to clarify that, to put annual leave there.
Yeah, well, just my concern is that if you're taking compensatory time potentially from the employee, and there's a rule change that allows them to have that return if they meet certain criteria, then I would be concerned with getting back the time that was actually took rather than just the annual leave. If you read the y'all's recommendations as as submitted.
So perhaps there might need to be a little change on the compensatory. There's no restriction on the appointing authority's ability to force an employee to use compensatory time right now. It's at the discretion of the appointing authority.
So
If I'm correct.
is the department's objection basically because this rule is entitled enforced annual leave and it doesn't deal with compensatory leave by definition by its title?
It's not an objection on the compensatory leave. We were merely trying to interpret what this rule change was doing, and the way we interpreted this, all this rule change was doing was allowing the commission to restore the forced use of annual leave because of its placement, and we thought just to clarify that.
Okay.
If it's intended to restore something else, that was not the impression we got from where the rule change is.
Chairman, may I provide a comment on behalf of the Troopers Association?
Certainly, Ms. White, thank you.
Thank you. Marion White on behalf of Louisiana State Troopers Association. I wanted to kind of provide some explanation for the LSTA's comments, but I first just wanted to, thank you commissioners for giving us some time between last month's meeting and this month's meeting to discuss these rules more. Unfortunately, due to the tight deadlines that we had in the Mardi Gras holiday, the parties weren't able to meet and come to some sort of agreement. I think that if we did have additional time, we might be able to get a little further on these. But we did, as you could see, both parties provided some comments. The LSTA's comments, if you see, we did want to propose that this restoration of leave be for both annual and compensatory, and so we suggested that the title of the rule just be enforced leave and not enforced annual, and then that's why we put in parentheses whether annual or compensatory. The other difference between our version of the proposed change and DPS's version is that we think it's more, that it should be for criminal charges.
And I don't mean to interrupt you, but before we get to that,
Okay.
let us kind of flesh out the issue relative to what the intent is as to what type of leave it applies to. I can't speak for the other commissioners. It was my impression that what we were trying to do was to grant authority to reinstate the leave that was taken from the employee, be it annual or be it compensatory. That was my impression. I'm not speaking for the rest of the commissioners, but is there any other discussion on that?
No, I mean, that was the original intent. Mr. Chairman, I think I brought the issue up when we heard the last case 2 months ago, I think is when it was brought here for the first time. And that is the fact that if an employee is charged with something criminally and there's an investigation going on with the appointing authority and he is forced to use leave and that employee is found to be not guilty or he's exonerated completely of the criminal charges, that that he would be restored any leave that he was forced to take.
Right.
That whatever kind of leave it was. So I'm in agreement with you, Mr. Chairman, that whether it was compensatory or whether it was vacation leave or whatever it was.
Any other comments from any other commissioners?
That was my impression also, is that. And because this, you do bring up a good point about our Chapter 11.9 is dealing with annual leave, and we should have it changed so that it just talks about enforced leave, which is really what we were dealing with. And if we don't have that addressed in compensatory times, then probably we should change the name of the title too, for our purposes, but that may affect our civil service, and we match up with the civil service type titles too. I don't know whether that makes a difference or not, but I was talking about the titles being changed. does that matter for us insofar as, we have,
It should be fine for us.
The potential problem I see is more of a placement issue, because you have several subparagraphs of 11.7 deals with annual leave, 11.8 is intentional blame, but then 11.10 deals with, again, the annual leave issue, and this would be placed in the middle.
And then you have an 11.29 for compensatory leave.
Correct.
Specific, and which is
And,
under discussion for today.
We have 11.29 for compensatory leave.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, we did.
And that was postponed to this meeting for discussion, so it's up for consideration today.
And would it be, could we, because we've given notice of the potential change to 11.29, could we leave this one as it is, referring to annual, and then when we get to 11.29, add in a equivalent provision on 11.29? Or would that be more of a change that we could do in light of the notice given?
You can certainly adopt rule on the floor and then provide an opportunity for public comment. And
That might be the easiest way to do it for placement purposes. Just don't let us forget it. We need to get back to that. All right, so I think that issue is a non-issue, because it appears the sentiment would be to go in the direction that the Troopers Association is indicating, but that this may not be the right place to do. So you had another aspect of this you wanted to discuss.
I did, thank you. Also, the other difference is that we would like to see the restoration of the annual or compensatory leave occur in the event criminal charges, the employee is exonerated of criminal charges, or if the employee is successful on any criminal appeal. And the reason for that versus just an administrative investigation and a potentially administrative appeal is because, if you recall, last month, Rule 12.4 was amended, and now we have 400 hours, or the department has 400 hours within which they can place an employee on administrative leave pending investigation. It used to be 30 working days, so there's a substantial more amount of time that now you can use that administrative leave, which does not draw down that annual leave balance. And you have to now, under the rules that have been amended, they have to use that administrative leave first. So for an administrative investigation, it can only last 60 days. They get 30 days, and then they get an additional 30 days upon request. But you're not going to exhaust that administrative leave, that 400 hours, in 60 working days, according to my calculations. And so there would really never be a need for anyone to be placed on enforced annual leave for just an administrative investigation. But I think what we have seen historically is that when someone is placed on leave due to a criminal investigation, the criminal investigation lasts a lot longer than the administrative investigation. And so it would be, so the annual leave potentially could be, the enforced annual leave provision potentially could be used in that employee who is under criminal investigation could have to draw down his annual leave balance to 240, and if he's exonerated, he doesn't get that back. Under my reading of the department's version, he does get it back under my reading of our comments. And so that's where the potential for a large amount of annual leave being used is for the criminal investigation, not the administrative investigation. So that's the reason for our version of the rule.
Well, let me just, does the department agree with the different interpretation of the two versions?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And that's the concern. The LSTA's version only deals with a criminal investigation. So the concern with dealing with a criminal investigation is the department has no control over criminal charges. That's solely within the purview of the district attorney's office. So if for whatever reason a district attorney decides to not bring criminal charges, but the same conduct violates state police policy and procedure and could result in the employee's termination, they by the LSTA's version of the rule, they get all the leave back, even though there's no flaw with the investigation or the conduct was just as serious to require their termination. So,
But if I'm hearing you correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you are saying though that even if there's no criminal investigation, if there's an administrative finding of misconduct, he would not get the time back. The trooper would not get the time back.
if there's only an administrative investigation, and we were going by the version of the commission's rules.
Okay.
So under the commission's rules, the way I read it, this is where I guess we kind of asked for an interpretation last time. To me, the way the rule is proposed by the commission only deals with administrative. That was my concern, it only deals with administrative. Because the only charges that can be brought by the appointing authority are violations of state police policy and procedure. In reading the commission's version, it only applies to criminal charges, but once again, the agency has no control over the bringing of criminal charges.
Chairman?
Yeah.
So, so what you're telling me is that the state police cannot arrest their own employees?
No, that's not.
Okay, so that's, well, what I'm saying is that, of course, bringing charges, but
But
the
the
person can
appointed
be
authority does
arrested.
not bring charges.
Yes,
Criminal. Individual officers do.
yes.
Many times those criminal investigations are not handled by LSP. Yeah, correct, we do handle some, but oftentimes it's another agency or fellow agency. So what about those situations?
Well, my concern, I'm sorry that.
No, I agree that under, if someone is, criminal charges are brought and they're forced to use annual leave or comp leave, that in the end, if they're exonerated criminally, charges are dismissed, found not guilty, I think it's right they should get their leave back. I think there are those, the way the LSTA version is proposed, you do have that other scenario where the individual may be exonerated criminally, but there's still significant policy violations that could result in termination, so should they get their leave back in that situation?
Okay, so you're pausing the investigation, let's say you're pausing the administrative investigation because there may be criminal charges by putting him on, her employee on forced annual leave. If they are found, if there's no criminal charges that are brought and the administrative investigation starts, and there are findings in regards to that employee, there are still discipline potentially on the administrative end. In addition to the time that they were put on forced leave for criminal charges that were potential criminal charges, which were never brought, potentially. So that's my concern, is that they've been put on forced annual leave for 2 months, for example. There's no criminal charges, and then there's policy violations, and there's another 200 hours of administrative violations, discipline. So the employee is getting hammered on, potentially on both ends, for something that, in essence, was an administrative investigation.
So I see these two proposed rules or two versions as completely opposite. The way I read the commission's version is they get their leave restored only when they're cleared of all charges on appeal, and that's an appeal to the commission. And they're cleared of the administrative charges, and the LSTA's version is only criminal. So,
Is there an opposition on the substance? Forget about what this says. Is there an opposition on the substantive issue of a person is put on leave because of a potential criminal investigation? That criminal investigation is never realized, or he goes to trial and he's exonerated, whatever the case might be. But then the department decides to administratively discipline that person and let's suppose it's not a 2-month standstill on the investigation, it's a year's standstill on the investigation. That person has lost a year's worth of time, of their leave time. Then the department, it never gets convicted. The department then determines that that person has committed a violation of the rules and disciplines that person. Is there an opposition to reinstating that person's leave that he had to use during the pendency of the criminal investigation that never took place? Is there any opposition to that?
I do not have a problem with that.
Then I think that's what we would want to try to establish. Now, maybe the way it was written didn't do that, but that's what we're trying to get at. So there's an agreement on the substance. The just problem is the wording. Y'all feel the wording doesn't get us there. Do we need to recommit this to, now that we're all clear on what it is that we're trying to accomplish?
I think we did. I think we need to, now that we're understanding that, you know, the way Commissioner Mears said it and the Colonel agrees, I think we need to rewrite this so we're all on the same page with this. I really do.
Yes. And unless any other discussion.
I think my problem is that understanding about district attorneys and the delays that go into that and the politics that sometimes go into that. And just the caseload sometimes has a tremendous effect on that, and it's just not something you get to in just the normal course of things when we've got a lot of cases. That it seems to me that the trooper shouldn't have his job pending all of that during that time. That the administration side of it needs to be, when they see that happening, they need to move forward with the determination on the administrative side whether they're going to keep that trooper or not.
Well, there is a couple things that happen, Commissioner, if you allow me. One, when we make that decision to go force leave, it is never taken lightly because we realize at that point they're burning their leave. And in many cases in a criminal case, it may not even, arrest may not have occurred yet. You just know that they're under investigation. And so you're trying to weigh what we know versus what we don't and trying to be fair. But I do agree that ultimately the charge is dismissed, not guilty, whatever, that really should be restored. But the other problem we've run into and that we try to guard against is at some point we're cautious about when we start that admin investigation. We technically started and put it on hold, but we realize that while that employee is under criminal investigation, we're hesitant to bring them in administratively and question them. Even though, that questioning, those answers, that discussion cannot be used against them criminally, you're putting them in a bad spot because now they're forced to answer our questions administratively, and it puts their job at risk by saying, I'm not going to answer your questions. So we try to avoid that conflict. But in some cases, you're right. We have some that we feel, okay, do we need to start the administrative investigation so this employee is not sitting in this
limbo,
losing
his time that whole time, and which may or may not be restored.
Well,
anyway.
Well, by this, I'm sorry, Commissioner, but if we make this rule change, the time would be restored.
Right.
So it would address some of that concern that you have. So I would entertain a motion to recommit this particular one to allow us to come up with the wording that achieves what I think everybody is in agreement on as to what we ought to achieve. And so everybody
I'll make a motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, why don't we move on to the next one now? Is that all the issues on C?
Yes.
It sounds like you won today on both of them, so. Director Hammond, what's the next one we need to move to? Is it 1110?
Correct, Mr. Chairman. And
Is there any issue with the change to paragraph A on employee, right?
No, again, it's just paragraph A through A through D. There are no changes that have received any comment.
So why don't we entertain a motion to approve
As well as F and G.
A through D and F and G, and then we'll discuss paragraph.
I'll move that we accept. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, let's have, why don't we go over what we're doing on paragraph E?
Okay. Mr. Chairman, paragraph E, again, this was intended to be a status quo change, changing for the department to the Office of State Police. The comment received from the LSTA were that the shall verbiage be changed to a may verbiage with regards to returning leave. The agency supports the request or the proposed change as published. And I believe that the shall verbiage remains appropriate as included in the proposed rule change, given that the employee shall only pay leave back under the rule if they choose to return to the classified service within 300 hours of separation. And then they only pay back the difference. So leaving after 1 week, they would return 260 hours since they were only away for the 40-hour week. So I believe that it's appropriate for the employee to return the hours if they leave and come back within the 300 hours. If they come back after the 300 hours, they do not have to return the 300 hours of paid leave.
Chairman, may I make a comment?
Yes.
Yes, so our comment and proposed change from shall to may is just geared towards those employees who leave and then have a change of heart or a change of circumstance, whatever the case may be, and within that 300 hours, they need to come back and they would like to be reemployed, but maybe they left a lot of leave, because they can only get paid out 300 hours of leave. So someone might have left 1,000 hours on the table, and they need to come back, but they don't need to buy back any leave because they have plenty in their bank. And so our change just is to provide for situations like that where maybe the money's not there anymore. The employee cannot buy it back, doesn't need to buy it back, doesn't want to buy it back, so it would be permissive instead of mandatory.
But you do agree that the maximum, I'll put it in quotation marks, penalty is that he has to pay back 300 hours or possibly 50 hours depending on when it is.
Right, I understand that part, yes.
Right. All right, so do we have a motion do we have a motion to approve as submitted, or we can also alternatively have a motion to approve as suggested by the LSTA? And so we have to have a motion on the floor to move forward.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Crawford.
I just want some clarification. The LSTA comments, if those are adopted, who determines the may? I mean, just my personal opinion is we can't have a rule that allows an employee to make a determination on a factual rule of the commission. That's chaos, to have an employee be able to determine if he or she is going to repay. And I'm not saying I don't understand what the argument is, but I'm saying from a commissioner standpoint, that creates a huge issue for us and administratively. There's no rules, in my experiences as being a chief, that allowed an employee to make a decision regarding a rule. And basically that's what we're doing. And I think we're subjugating our own authority here by allowing that to happen on either case, the authority or the member. So I think that needs to be clarified before I can, make a motion or entertain a motion to accept that.
Commissioner Crawford, I agree with your assessment, and I don't think I can make the motion, but if someone would make the motion that would be as promulgated in our circular, I would support that motion, because I think it has to be a shall.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Any discussion now that we have a motion on the floor? Okay. Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the change of rule? Do we have to do this by reading it now, or because that's the way it was promulgated?
It was published in the circular as in your chart on item E, so 11.10E as published.
Okay. So the motion is to approve the change to 11.10E as published. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. That takes us to where?
The new rule, again, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Chairman, 11.13.1, which is be entitled Enforced Sick Leave, is a rule that's currently within the state civil service and the 30,000+ classified employees under that service, and the 20,000+ unclassified employees that are governed by the governor's office on governor's executive order on unclassified leave. The verbiage is similar to the verbiage used in both of those jurisdictions, and was meant to put our rules and the discretion of the appointing authority in a similar posture in governing their employees.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. White.
Okay, thank you. So our comments and our version, I just wanted to say first of all that the LSPA supports the appointing authority's discretion and ability to put employees on leave when he deems necessary. We have no problem with that. We have no question about that, because we do believe that everyone's entitled to a safe working environment. So if there's an issue and that needs to be addressed, we have no problem with that. Our proposed changes are just what sort of leave is drawn down when there's a fitness for duty issue. That's the gist of the proposed changes, and it's just trying to have a measure of protection of an employee's sick leave balance. So in the event that there is a question about fitness for duty, whether it's mental, physical, what have you, our suggestion would be that the appointing authority have the ability to use administrative leave for circumstances such as that, because we know that sometimes that's an investigation that takes some length of time. Maybe there's an evaluation that needs to be conducted, and appointments that need to be made with licensed medical professionals, and so those things take time. And so our suggestion would be that the rule that maybe we had suggested place it in 12.4, because that's the administrative leave pending investigation rule. I'm not sure if it's appropriate to discuss that or just put it in a different rule in 11, but that is our suggestion, that you consider that when there's an unfitness for duty issue, that the employee's sick leave is not drawn down, that they're not placed on forced sick leave, that employee is placed on administrative leave instead. And I'm happy to answer any other questions you have about that.
So your proposal would require we adopt another rule that would allow the imposition, well, not the imposition, but the granting of administrative leave in this situation as opposed to using sick leave.
That's correct.
Made an agency comment?
You didn't have any comments on what we have, you just want to speak in favor of what we have?
Well, we support what we have, but I would like to make some comments on the commission's objection or proposed change to the language that is in the proposed rule.
That's fine, go ahead.
So that's exactly what sick leave is for, is when an employee can't do the job because of some illness, injury, or disability. And essentially when they can't perform the job, the guidance from civil services, that's the employee asserting a need to be away on sick leave. So, I mean, mean, that's what the rule does, is it gives the appointing authority when someone obviously either can't do the job, that they perform the essential functions of their job, or says, you know, maybe my hand's broken, I can't fire a gun, then they can't perform the essential functions of the job, and that's what sick leave is for. And if they refuse and keep coming to work, the appointing authority has the ability to say, you can't do your job, you're gonna take sick leave while the condition lasts. It's not a, permanent thing, it's while the condition lasts, while the illness or injury or disability lasts.
Commissioner Brown?
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think the challenge with the Troopers Association language is you could potentially have every trooper show up for work sick, knowing that if I show up for work sick, I'm not gonna have to use my sick leave. I'm gonna force the authority to put me off on administrative leave, and I'm never gonna use that. So that's a challenge that I see with what you're proposing, is that you'll have some members, you have an organization that large, will take advantage of that, unfortunately, and that's with any organization. That's with my organization. When I govern 500 firefighters, they will find a way. And so I think your challenge is how do you overcome that if we were to move forward with what you're suggesting.
And just to make it clear, and just Commissioner Mayor, just one second, just to make it clear, it doesn't just happen in government, it would happen in my office too. If I told people, if I felt we got a coronavirus going around right now, okay?
Right.
And someone's diagnosed, but they say they want to come to the office, I'm gonna tell them you can't come to the office. I'm sorry, you can't come, and if they got sick leave, they're gonna use their sick leave. Commissioner Mayor, I'm sorry.
Thank you for recognizing me. No, I think that my concern and the concern of the employee is someone else determining if you're fit for duty or not. Sick leave, as I see it, as the employee, when they are sick, is choosing to stay home or taking it off because of someone else in the hospital, whatever the case may be. So it's for the employee being sick, but when the department is saying you're unfit for duty, could be mental, potentially. It could be some type of illness in regards to cancer. And someone's making the employee take off, and then who determines when they come back? Is it do they get evaluated? Is it by the supervisor? Those are the concerns that I have for the employee.
I think the agency has well-established procedures on how to deal with that, and it's not necessarily the agency's decision, and it's not necessarily the employee's decision. It's the appropriate healthcare provider that reports that to the agency and clarifies or clears that this employee, whether it's a mental health issue, a physical issue, is fit for duty, is fit to return to work. And we get many on a weekly basis that, it's simply a physical issue, an injury, or they need a medical procedure on a knee or elbow or wrist, and we have a light duty status, and at some point they're returned to full duty, and the doctor clears them. So I think there's already processes to cover that. I think, obviously, I think everyone agrees the superintendent, the appointing authority should be able to send someone home when they're not capable of performing their duties, whether it's physical, mental, or other disability.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner.
I'd like to make a motion, we accept 11.13.1 as submitted.
Second.
As published.
Any additional discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I oppose it.
The ayes have it. So what do we have next?
Rule 11.19. This rule is opposed by the LSTA, the other comments, and then the Department of Public Safety has also mentioned that they would like additional time to research the proposed amendments to 11.19 as stated in General Circular 203. I will say the intent, Mr. Chairman, of this change was not to remove an ability, but simply clarify that the ability does not exist to transfer leave between departments, because there is only one department for the Office of State Police, for the classified state police service.
But in light of the opposition and in light of the request for additional time,
I have no problem.
we could entertain a motion to
I'll make a
table.
motion. Second.
All in favor? Any opposed?
Yes.
You opposed? I'm sorry, we got to ask for comments. Before we vote, any comments? I thought you were the one that seconded, actually.
My thought is that we need to go ahead and clarify that, and then if we need to make any other changes, that we can come back at a later time to do that. We've already proposed this, it's in final form, it's needed to do, it's the leave following military service is a good, I mean, I don't see opposition to that. And I think we need to clarify that we can't transfer. That issue should be put to rest, that we can't transfer between, as a person coming in from the office, from any other state department, can't transfer their leaves there. And we need to get that off the table and make that decision. And if there are other changes that need to be made that the department requests or anything else, then we can do that later. But we've already promulgated this, and I'd like to go ahead and get it done.
All right. So, to clarify, at this point, the motion is to table this. A yes vote would mean that we table it, a no vote would mean that we don't table it, and then we would provide Commissioner Knapp with an opportunity to move that we adopted as promulgated. All right. So, all in favor of the current motion to table, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
No. The ayes have it. It's tabled. Despite your eloquent comments, Commissioner. So where are we now?
Mr. Chairman, that brings us to 11.29, compensatory leave, and that is the final rule to consider.
We need to address the issue that the other rule only dealt with annual leave, and we need to have a similar rule that deals with compensatory leave to allow the reinstatement, but other than that. Is that part of what you did here? No. Right. Okay, so let's deal with what we have here, and then we'll come back to adopting a rule similar to the annual leave rule on reinstatement.
I would move we tabled this.
Wait a minute. I'm not recognizing Commissioner.
Well, we have to change it.
Yeah, and I was gonna second it because we've gotta change it based on what we had done on annual leave. It has to be changed.
Well, Jason said we could just go ahead and proceed with a change to the compensatory leave on the floor and then open it up for comments and explain what the process you told me about earlier.
Sure. If you believe that there's a proposed rule that needs to be amended, or if there's something that needs to be created, you can read into the record the proposed rule, vote to adopt the amended proposed rule, ask for public comment on the newly amended rule, and then vote to adopt the final version of that rule. So there's a process in place.
Mr. Chairman, I recognize that, but we are giving DPS time to review stuff. We put it out there for them to review. If we're gonna make a change like this, I would just feel better about it, saying that we're doing it next month. And because there might be a trooper, there might be an employee that isn't fully aware of what we're doing right here today, and that would give them the opportunity to come.
Okay. Any other discussion? And I do believe we have a motion and a second to table. Any other discussion on the motion and the second to table? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So Jason, you're going to promulgate a proposed rule change relative to adding the new rule to pick up the gap that we didn't take care of at the end. It'll probably be the same rule, it's just going to refer to compensatory.
Yeah, I will work on that verbiage.
All right, I think that'll be an easy task this time.
And if I could, real quick, since y'all said because of the Mardi Gras holidays that there were some things that we still wanted to talk about, if it falls under the last two items that we discussed, please make some time to do that, so when we see y'all next month, you'll be able to cut to the chase, for lack of a better term. Thank you.
Commissioner Rickey, I would like to remind the parties that there's a 15-day promulgation window. So whatever verbiage is agreed upon has to be achieved so that we can promulgate a draft rule within the 15 days prior to the next meeting.
Well, based on the discussions that we have, I don't think there's disagreement over the compensatory reinstatement, so just get that published if you don't hear anything on it in time, and the rest of these, I think the only reason we deferred the rest of these was because we wanted to deal with this as a single rule change, so. Any other, do we have any requests to address the commission on items not on the agenda? Okay. Well, with that, the director's report.
I'll be brief, Mr. Chairman. As always, your commission's expenditures have been listed on tab 5 in the binder. I will also call the commission to the fact that the chairman and I yesterday appeared before House and Governmental Affairs Committee. We introduced ourselves to the 14 new members of that committee. There's 17 members on the committee and 14 of them are new. We gave a brief overview of the role of the State Police Commission, and I will say that there was a very supportive response to the news of our online cadet testing. It was welcomed by many of the members at the committee. And as a follow-up, the House Appropriations meeting, which was scheduled to be reviewed yesterday, has actually been moved to March 23rd. So if any of you would like to join me at the little table for our budget review at House Appropriations, feel free to join me. And then one other update on the cadet testing front. Due to the reduced time frame for the Office of State Police to get cadets in the system as quick as possible, we encouraged every applicant that applied for the cadet exam to embrace and utilize the online or electronic format. And I'm pleased to say that 100% of the applicants in February utilized that test. So that was 53 individuals that took the exam either online, 25 online, or 28 of them actually showed up in person to one of the 4 sessions that we offer every week and took the exam. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. And you were rather generous when you said that we reported all this. I sat there while Director Hanneman reported all this stuff to the commission, to the committee. So, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move.
Any second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The meeting is adjourned at